6 U.S. cities are now seeing year-over-year home price declines, and they're all in the South. Well, are these falling prices going to be a growing national trend? And if you think that's a surprise, here's the shocker. The top states that Americans are moving to are dominated by the South. So yes, the states that include these fastest growing cities with now falling prices. Well, that's totally backwards because people moving in, that usually means that home prices go up. But even that is not saving these housing markets. And what exactly is going on here to square up this paradox of growing populations with falling home prices? I'm going to explain it. Hi, I'm Keith Weinhold, Get Rich Education founder. I serve on the Forbes Real Estate Council, best-selling author, and longtime real estate investor. Among the nation's 50 largest metro area housing markets, these 6 markets have seen outright year-over-year home price declines over the past 12 months. Going from least worst to very worst, Dallas is down 0.3%, Jacksonville the same, Tampa down 0.5%, San Antonio down 2.7%, Austin down 4%, and New Orleans down 4% as well. Well, Austin, Texas, it is the fastest growing city in America, #1. Yet no city has home prices that are dropping faster. In fact, as the fastest growing city, Austin has both falling home prices and falling rents, which sounds really weird. I mean, what a paradox. I've got some interesting real estate observations for you since I just spent a few days each in all 3 of America's fastest declining price cities. I was in New Orleans, San Antonio, and Austin. And yes, it was even more interesting than my tour of the Texas State Capitol in Austin here, which I learned has 4 underground stories. This was me driving into Austin, and besides the shiny new buildings, you also see cranes in the air there. There is just loads of active, what it is residential apartment building taking place. One particular Austin street that I walked and spent about 2 hours on, Rainey Street, just south of the downtown, that is one of the most interesting real estate streets in America right now, and it is precisely emblematic of what is going on here. Here on Rainey Street, they're building several apartment towers around 500 feet tall, and I have never seen anything like it. It is the densest concentration of simultaneous apartment construction that I've ever seen, and this provides a clue about why prices and rents are paradoxically falling, and many of these shiny new towers are right across the street from what look like 100-year-old one-story bungalows that have been converted into these little boutique sort of bars and restaurants. I went inside those. So a totally weird scene. Well, Austin, even as a gentrified hipster haven with murals on street corners, food trucks, and coffee shops that make you feel like you're in an indie film, they simply built too much there. Despite the population growth, the building in Austin got too far out ahead of it, and that's why a lot of those new apartment units, they're gonna stay vacant for a while. So we're talking about overbuilding here. Austin's amenities and appeal for some people, that cannot compete with classic supply versus demand dynamics. And really what I saw in both San Antonio and Austin is emblematic of the new apartment supply surge. What's going on Rainey Street? It is what I call America's apartment oversupply ground zero. Yeah, it just all comes back to that simplicity of supply versus demand. This chart gives you some idea about Austin's available housing supply surge, even though this doesn't capture all the apartments. All right, so of the 6 U.S. cities with declining home values, all 6 in the South, Austin is so emblematic of that supply-demand imbalance. Too much supply has led to falling prices. And now there's an important related lesson that we can learn from looking at the national map of home price appreciation like we are right here. You'll see that northern states lead the way. Why do northern states have more price appreciation than southern states, despite still more people moving south? Again, it's a lack of building in the northern states. So a paltry amount of available supply. That means that whatever housing comes on the market, we then have multiple prospective buyers and renters, and that therefore drives their prices up. And in some pockets of the South, you have more properties than buyers, keeping their prices closer to flat. And note on this map too that all 50 states are experiencing year-over-year home price appreciation. All 50 states are up in value. You don't have to, but go ahead and put a like on the video here if you like how I'm breaking down these trends. I've got more important info for you on the direction of the U.S. housing market and its future, and really appreciate your like. Now, those 6 cities with declining values, they're probably only going to be temporary declines. That supply will get absorbed. In fact, of America's 50 largest cities, only those 6 that I mentioned earlier are declining. That means, yep, the other 44 cities are rising. In this chart, note the third numeric column, that year-over-year home price change. Most are up because overall, as a nation, we still have this ongoing lack of housing supply, and that's why prices are rising in most places. Up, up, up. As we take a look here, Freddie Mac estimates that the national housing shortage is a whopping 3.7 million units. Some outlets estimate that it's even more than that, some less. We need to build 1.8 million homes each year, year after year, but we haven't done that in 20 years. So we're 0 for the last 20 in building the number of homes that we need nationally. And if this continues, the U.S. housing scarcity will keep widening. It will get worse. It's going to grow by over 200,000 homes per year if we continue this current inadequate level of building. So some cities like Austin, though they're interesting, they really are an aberration. They have a terribly overbuilt apartment segment, but nationally we are underbuilt and especially undersupplied all over the place in the single-family home segment. And that gets reflected in rent prices because apartment lists, they tell us that national apartment rents are pretty flat. In fact, they're down 0.8% over the past year, and available single-family home rents, since they're in more scarce supply than apartments, well, the CoreLogic Single-Family Rent Index shows us that their rents are up 2% annually. And yeah, that makes sense. In fact, the overbuilding of apartments has actually somewhat slowed the single-family rent growth. Now, you might think that those two things are not related, but they're a little related. I mean, just consider the plight of a tenant and what they're looking for. They might ideally seek and want a single-family rental home, but see if a good new apartment is substantially cheaper, well, then they might accept an apartment as an alternative. And that's one reason that single-family rent growth is just a pretty modest 2%, rather than a more normal 4% annually or so. Now, in America, wage growth is 4.6%. That is now outstripping inflation. And what that does is that opens the door for future rent growth to increase. So tenant wages are up. But what slowed the rent growth this past year are all these apartment completions that we have right now. Now, long-term apartments are going to be fine because the demographic demand for apartments, that is going to be there because our population is growing and because there aren't many new apartment starts that are going to get absorbed in the future. So this means that over the next few years, supply demand should come more back into balance along with these rising real wages. And while though we could keep having this ongoing deficiency of single family homes, it would be almost impossible for housing prices to crash in mass because of this aforementioned supply shortage. We also have homeowners that have record levels of protective equity. They're not going to walk away from that like they did in 2008. And we've had these years of high inflation. That means we have permanently embedded higher costs of housing construction, higher costs of labor, materials, and still high amounts of expensive building regulation. And this is why I expect home prices to keep appreciating from here along with single family rents. National home prices are up about 3 or 4% so far this year, and we'll see where they end up. But I'm telling you, with the demographic setup that we have for, say, 2025 to 2029, housing prices in the 2030s could look highly pricey compared to where they are today. It's probably not going to take long for today's prices to actually feel cheap. And that leads me to tell you that I've got some pretty exciting news. Yes, it is about that time. Coming up right here on the channel, I'm going to release GRE's 2025 National Home Price Appreciation Forecast, where I tell you exactly how much home price appreciation I expect next year, and I'll reveal the figure like I always do to the nearest percent, so you will get a number. And importantly, this is the 4th straight year that I'm doing this, and the world needs more accountability. So besides releasing the number for next year, we're going to look at my track record to see just how accurate or inaccurate my predictions have actually been. I mean, don't you wish that everyone did that? So yes, it's on the 21st of this month. To make sure you don't miss it, not only must you be subscribed to the channel here on YouTube, but you also have to hit that little notification bell in order to get notified. And to whet your appetite for that event, do you know how much US home prices have risen in aggregate over the last 40 years? Do you think they've gone up 100%, 200%, 300%, or even 400% in total during that span? No, it's actually even more than all those figures. I talk about how much home prices have risen since 1984, and you'll get an exact number. You're probably going to be amazed, and I'll even show you how your state has performed. You can watch that one right now in this video here.